Why do car boots have to start so early in the morning? Well, this one doesn't. This one starts at 11 a.m.
Get pickups! Building the bench room! Work trips! Night game hunting!
Hello again, folks, and welcome back to another live game hunting episode. I'll be the first to admit I absolutely love a car boot, but why do car boots have to start so early in the morning? More often than not, it's the only day off of the week I get, and who wants to be getting up out of bed at a crack of dawn about 5 a.m. to trudge around a muddy field? Of course I will, because there is no better way to build a collection or to get games to trade into CX for in-store credit than the car boot, and that is why I love this car boot so much. It has a strict 11 a.m. start. This is the car boot just outside Awesomeness in North Norfolk, and it is an absolute win in my eyes. I am going to run a poll on YouTube later in the week to find out which is better, early morning car boots or late start car boots. But before we start this week's video, jump into the comments down below and let me know, are you an early car booter or a late car booter? It finally seems like British summertime is upon us, and that can only mean one thing: more car boots on the horizon. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe, as I put new videos out every Saturday live at 5, as well as bonus content throughout the week. Now, it looks like it's about 11 a.m. We've had a nice relaxed start to the day. Let's head to the car boot. Here we are then, it is a beautiful day, and it is just about 11 a.m. here at the late one, a car boot just outside Aylsham in North Norfolk. And as you can see, the car park is already packed, and it looks like it's going to be a really busy one today. Here we go then, straight off the bat, and we are jumping in, and it is quite busy to start off here, but that's also probably because this is one of the very first stalls when you enter the car boot. And I've straight away found this really cool Star Wars Clone Wars helmet. Let's just hope it's at a decent price.
What's your helmet, buddy?
It's 15 because it's the Star Wars one. Yeah. But it's got, I don't think the sounds on it do work though, pal.
Okay, cool.
I think I've changed.
15 because it's a Star Wars one. If the sound had worked, I'd have probably tried to kind of barter this one down, as it is a super cool display piece, but £15 without the sound working, I think I'll pass. Heading into the car boot and a big table of DVDs. This is quite an easy way to see DVDs that are good in here. I've pointed at that one, I can't remember why. I think that was just quite an interesting film, or a film I've been meaning to watch. I did have my eye on these two pretty cool looking collector's editions of World of Warcraft, but unfortunately I think these are pretty common, and as a general rule, just wait for this later in the video, I don't pick up that many PC games, especially for something like an MMO. They were pretty cool, but they do take up a lot of space, but this is a really cool way to display stuff at a car boot. Makes it nice and easy to see everything you're selling. +1 from me. Great start. First games of the car boot, and this is more often than not what you're going to find when you go to the car boot, just an absolute stuffed box of mainly shovelware, FIFA, old PlayStation 2 games that most people don't want. Now, all of these games were £2 each, but here is the thing: when I stumble across a massive box of games like this one, I'm going to dig, because you never know when you're going to find hidden treasure in a box like this. You can find something you even need for the collection, or something that's selling for really cheap that you can then flip into CX for in-store credit. But more often than not, it is like this time when there's not really anything here, which is a real shame. But this is the thing at the car boot. Sometimes you have to dig deep and just get involved, jump in, go for these boxes, and sometimes, not this time, you may find gold. I've been collecting for the PSP since it very first came out, and I've amassed quite a large selection of both movies and games, because more often than not, they're cheap. How much are your PSP games?
£2 each, mate.
Unfortunately, these games and films were not cheap this time, so I did decide to pass, because I have no idea why, but it's still super cheap to collect for the PSP. But take advantage now, as you never know when those prices are going to rise. Another mixed box here. You can see there's some PlayStation 4 games in here, but of course most of the time they're going to be FIFA games, a load of DVDs which are unfortunately probably worthless, and a couple of shovelware PlayStation 2 games. But if you're looking to build a game collection on the cheap, the PlayStation 2 is a great place to start. All these games I think were like £1 each, and at the end of the day you can pick up so many cheap but still half decent games for the PlayStation 2, because in my eyes it's still one of the cheapest consoles to collect for, especially at the car boot. Whenever I'm at the car boot, I always keep an eye out for modern or retro toys. I think these ones fall somewhere in the middle. I think these were either Burger King or Happy Meal toys back in the day when these restaurants, I use that term loosely, used to like give away decent plastic toys with their figures. I can understand why they don't nowadays. I do already have these in the collection, but they're pretty cool to see nonetheless, and a real throwback to better days. Normally when I go to the Carboot, I am with my wife, and it's really good to have another set of eyes at the Carboot because I just walked past this stall and I nearly missed this little tiny pile of PlayStation 2 games. So there were some DVDs here as well. Obviously there was nothing here to write home about, unfortunately, but this is the thing about, and what I love about the Carboot, you never know. You never know what's going to be hiding in any of these little stacks. That's why it always pays to check every single store. Here we go then. The first store was some really decent games of the Carboot. We've got some PlayStation 4, even some PlayStation 5, and some Nintendo DS games I have never seen before. But sometimes a lot of this stuff can be overpriced at the Carboot, but let's see if we can strike a deal on this bundle of games.
Which way are your games, buddy?
3 on that road, 5 on that one, 10 on that one at the moment.
So it sounds like we have some decent prices, but he did say he'd do a bit of a deal if I took a few more. So let's build ourselves a little bit of a bundle. The first game I'm putting out here, Devil May Cry Trilogy on the PlayStation 4. It is the best way to go back and play some of these absolutely classic PlayStation games. Obviously, they were originally released on the PlayStation 2, and you just get a little bit more quality of life playing it on the PlayStation 4. Now, I've never seen this before in my life. Assassin's Creed games on the Nintendo DS. Yes, I know a lot of these games when they're ported over to the DS are nowhere near as good as their console counterparts, but sometimes these can be really interesting games. So, you know, we had the price at the start, so we're looking to see what else we can add, and it's hard watching this back as it is a bit of a fail. So you saw I picked up the BioShock game there. I'm kind of looking around, building a little bit of a bundle here. I even checked the disc of BioShock, but I have made a bit of a fail, but let's see if we can make a bundle.
What would be your best on those for?
Thank you. Yeah, 15. We'll go, mate.
Yeah, I'll go 15 on them.
So with a little bit of patience and perseverance, we did manage to make a bundle deal, and here we have some PlayStation 2 games that'll be pretty decent to pick up cheap to trade in, namely Need for Speed Underground 2 and WWE Here Comes the Pain. These are the kind of games, if you can pick them up super cheap, they are worth trading into CX, but the thing is you should always check the discs. These were incomplete and the discs were a little bit grim, and at the end of the day, it's not really worth picking them up if you can't trade them in because the discs are too scratched for CX to take them. Now here is a box set which I thought would have traded in for more money. No, not the music DVDs, even though these are really worth keeping an eye out for. Hiding at the bottom here is the Fast and Furious box set. And you'd have thought with the new film being out in the cinemas at the moment, this would trade in for a lot more, but unfortunately it only trades in for a couple of quid, which is a real shame. I am actually going back and watching all of these films at the moment on Now TV. If not, I would have picked up this Blu-ray box set, but generally surprised this one doesn't ship in for more at CX. The same stall actually had a rather large box of PC games underneath as well, and whilst I don't pick up PC games too often, I do try and keep an eye out for games which I don't think are available to buy digitally online anymore, because of course, like any online games, when the stores close or they lose licenses or the game's just no longer listed, it's harder to find these games. And for some reason I thought this game, Medal of Honor Allied Assault, was no longer sold online. It turns out it was, but for 50p it's not a bad pickup for a PC collection. Here is something that's worth keeping an eye out for at the Carboots, these little electronic games from I think the 80s and early 90s. This is the MB Simon, Pocket Simon, and I've picked this up before and sold on eBay for a decent profit, about £15. So if you can pick these up cheap, they're worth keeping an eye out for, but always make sure you check the battery compartment, because if they've had the batteries left in for years, they can corrode, go rusty and easily damage, in which case most of the time these are worthless, and this time in fact it was corroded. Few more games here mixed in with some DVDs. Again, the original Xbox games can be really cheap to pick up at the Carboot, and it's always worth checking some of these kids DVDs for some of the hidden treasures. I would have picked up this Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, but unfortunately it was just like not the full artwork, so I did pass and leave it behind. Whenever I'm at the Carboot, I always keep an eye out for any vintage Pokemon stuff. There is so much new Pokemon stuff now, but it's only really worth keeping an eye out for a lot of the retro stuff. And this is really cool. This is something I've never seen before. I think it's a PC CD-ROM game, so you can play the Pokemon trading card game on your PC. And I just love these little kind of zeitgeist items, these retro Pokemon stuff, and the artwork on the back of this was absolutely amazing. I don't know the value of this one, so I wanted to find out if I could pick it up cheap, because if I can, I'd be tempted.
How much was your Pokemon disc?
That was £3.
Yeah. £2?
No, it's children's money.
I did feel a little bit bad as I did pass on this one for £3, but I haven't got the greatest knowledge of some of this retro Pokemon stuff, and at the end of the day, this could be a very cheap item. I wasn't sure, so I did decide to pass, but let me know in the comments down below, would you have picked up this vintage Pokemon CD-ROM? Here we have a rather large box of Blu-rays, and unfortunately it does seem that a majority of Blu-rays just trade in for very little nowadays.
Yeah.
It is getting harder and harder to find films and movies and TV shows that trade in for a decent money. I did pick a few out here, but scanning all of these, unfortunately there was nothing worth taking CX. The price of Call of Duty games in CX goes up and down all of the time, and it's always best to keep an eye on this, as a little while ago it was worth picking up Modern Warfare 2, but unfortunately now it is not worth picking it up because it trades in for very little, and also unfortunately this disc was really badly scratched. But on to the next. Now, I know a lot of people don't like resellers at the Carboot, but I don't really see a problem with it. At the end of the day, they buy all the items, bring them all together, and you can normally buy them at a decent price. Now, more often than not, they do charge a little bit more for this, but it does solve you the hassle of going out and finding these games in the first place. And normally it's a great place to find some games, especially if they're kind of slipping on the prices. But one of the problems is sometimes these are overpriced or absolute market value, and the thing is, if I'm buying at a Carboot, I'm probably looking to get a deal, because if the game is the same price at CX or less, of course I'm going to pick it up at CX. That's because then if you have any issues with the game, if it doesn't work, you can take it back to the store and get it returned. Of course you do not have this luxury at the Carboot, but let's see if we can get a little bit of a deal on these two Steelbook games here.
How much for your Steelbooks, buddy?
That one's £4, that one's 20.
That one got the game. They both got the game in us.
Yeah.
So as you can see here, unfortunately that Street Fighter 5 was pretty overpriced at 20 quid, but it is well worth keeping a lookout for Steelbook games, especially at the Carboot, as some of these Steelbooks trade in for some really good money. But this is kind of one of the problems at the Carboot. A lot of people are asking for a lot of money for some of these games. I understand they go out of their way to get these games. You know, it takes time, effort, and money to build up these collections to sell at the Carboots. Don't get me wrong, they're a fantastic way to add games to your collection, but for me, if I'm at a Carboot, I'm looking for a bit more of a deal. Here is the biggest question of today's video. Are you brave enough to buy a console sold as seen at a Carboot? I have been burnt by these so many times before, and even if this one looked in pretty good condition, boxed and complete, I did pass. But let me know in the comments down below, would you buy a console from the Carboot? Let me know. Here we go then, another reseller and another massive box of games, but let's see if we can find anything in here either to add to the collection or to trade into CX. And this is one of the classic games to trade into CX, Minecraft. Let's find out how much this one is.
How much you got on Minecraft, buddy? 10.
Absolutely perfectly priced there, £10, exactly what it sells for in CEX. So unfortunately, not a bargain to be had here. Don't get me wrong, if you were looking to pick up this game, maybe it's not the worst idea. Like, you can pick it up for the exact value it would be in store, but for me personally, I'd pass and pick it up in store. Hiding down here, we have some very, very vintage consoles, and this TV game looks a heck of a lot like an Atari. I would have actually played an Atari game. Unfortunately, neither of these had the power supply, so I did pass, and this isn't really my era of gaming, and these things did look a bit rough, but I did decide to pass on these ones. Again, let me know. £5 for an Xbox One. It spares and repairs. I have no electronic know-how how to fix this, but would you personally have picked this one up for £5 knowing it didn't work? Now, unknowingly here we are minutes before disaster. That is slight hyperbole. We just have a little bit of a fail here. You can see I'm picking up this Ridge Racer game, having a look through a lot more of these games and just checking them out. And something which I've got a lot better at recently is actually checking the discs. Firstly, they're actually in the boxes, as the number of times I've picked up empty boxes is slightly concerning, and also that the games aren't scratched, because, you know, at the end of the day, if the game doesn't work, I don't want it in the collection and I can't trade it into CX. But sometimes if I can get a game cheap enough, which I think I can flip into CX for a little bit of profit, I will take a risk on some of these games that might just need a resurfacing so they can work again. But if I'm going to take a risk on a game, I want to pick it up really cheap. So let's see if we can pick up this Ridge Racer game on the cheap, or whether I should just leave it behind.
£3 each.
That's really scratched.
Would you say 2 on that one? It's pretty scratch.
Yeah.
That does work. Put new batteries in.
It's probably a little
You
bit
can't see
bright.
it,
No.
You can't see it in daylight.
I can see it from here.
That's right, this is a vintage TMNT nightlight. The light projects lights on the ceiling for your child or for a middle-aged man who loves Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Are they all different price your games, buddy, or?
Yeah, they're all £2.50 each. They're all fine.
Thank you very much.
Sadly, there was nothing really worth picking up here. Let me know if there's anything I've missed you'd have picked up. I was tempted to pick up Call of Duty World at War, but I'd have only made about £1 or so trading on that one. And I don't exactly try and make a ton of money when I'm trading. As long as I double my money, I'm normally quite happy. But the main thing is making a profit. But at these prices, I did decide to pass, but not bad prices. Here's something we're seemingly seeing less and less at the Carboots, these Nintendo DS games. Now, all of these were individually priced. I was quite tempted to pick up Project Rub. I couldn't remember if I had it in my collection. I do already have it, so of course, it's a weird Nintendo DS game. Of course, why wouldn't I have it? And there was a few games I was tempted to pick up here, but I don't know, a lot of the games on the DS have not aged fantastic. Like Tomb Raider Legend is probably not going to be great on the DS. I know it sounded a bit hypocritical because I picked up some Assassin's Creed games earlier, but it's more those kind of weird oddities that I'm going to pick up if I pick up games to the DS. I would have picked up Nintendogs if it was a little bit cheaper, as that one trades in quite nicely to CX. But if you do ever see a massive box of DS games like this, it's always worth checking in case somewhere hiding amongst them is a Pokemon game. This next store had some really cool items. It had some brand new and sealed Pokemon DVDs. I have no idea why they had so many of these. But it also had some of my very favourite modern and retro action figures, the Star Wars Retro series. These are obviously brand new figures that they've made to look like the Star Wars figures from the 70s. And I absolutely love these. I think I have the whole of The Mandalorian Season 1 and also the Obi-Wan figures. I was missing a few of these, so let's hope I can get these at a cheap rate. About £5 to £6 to pick them up.
How much were your Star Wars figures, buddy?
10 quid each. There's a couple of them that are cheap for 15.
And your Pokemon DVDs?
A couple of quid.
So unfortunately I did decide to pass on the Star Wars figures, as these are quite often on sale, and also the DVD of Pokemon, because at the end of the day I'd have only opened it up and watched it. But who here remembers Eye of Judgment? It was the future of augmented reality. Can I pick it up cheap?
And your pack cards?
£3 quid.
I don't know if I'm a camera for that one.
So again, I did pass on the Eye of Judgment cards, as I have no idea what they go for nowadays. Same as these. They were a little bit rough around the edges, to say the least, but these Mighty Morphin Power Ranger vintage figures were a thing of absolute beauty. I did like Power Rangers back in the day. I don't really have that kind of nostalgia for it as much as I do other cartoon series, so I did decide to pass on these figures, but it's super cool to see these vintage figures at the Carboot.
How much are your games, buddy?
£2 each, mate.
Now is a great time to build your Xbox One collection, as you can get some super cheap games at the Carboot. This was very, very tempting to me. I collect these NECA figures, mainly the TMNT ones, but this Terminator 2 one was straight out of the Terminator 2 video game, and it was very, very tempting. There was only really one game I wanted to pick up here, which was Just Cause 4, because crazily most of the other games here were worth about £2. I was very, very tempted by this Terminator figure. It was really cool.
Mate, it's good,
we just couldn't seem to agree a price. I think he was stuck on about 20 quid, which is about right for it, but it was a little bit kind of rough around the edges. if I could have got this for cheaper, I would have definitely picked this up. It was
Nice,
super cool,
that'll
but
do,
when it
mate.
comes to these
That's
kind of
decent.
retro figures, it's all about condition.
Nice.
Next stall over, more cheap Xbox One games. I picked one game up for the collection and one to trade into CX, so stick around for them pickups. How much are your games? Strange things often happen at the Carboots. Like the next 3 stalls have some really weird retro 90s items. Like who in the 90s had these kind of generic electronic handheld games? I think it's like a Tetris one and something else. And I think everyone had this pin art thing. And yes, I think everyone just stuck their face straight into this, or at least their hand. And it was just, in the 90s, a board game could be anything. Like an M&M's board game. Who wanted an M&M's board game? It's so random, and I do normally pass on board games at the Carboots because you never know if they're going to be complete, but this one did tickle me because it's such an obscure thing to have, an M&M's board game. Just blew my mind. This was always one of my favourite toys of the 90s, Micro Machines, and these Star Wars Micro Machines were super cool. I love the fact they fold out into much bigger play sets, but again, these are very difficult to find in like complete condition without missing any of the figures or anything. And an absolute shout out to those amazing NatWest piggy banks and a lone Xbox controller. This, my friends, is where we always check the disc. Star Wars Battlefront 2, Battlefield 2 inside. Very, very close, but no cigar. I can easily see why this could be confused, but yeah, always check those discs. Keeping the Star Wars theme, here we have some Nintendo DS Star Wars games. And if I could have picked these up for like £1 each, I'd have probably grabbed them, as I have some pretty good memories of my brother playing these games growing up on his Nintendo DS, but these were a little bit overpriced for my mind. But it had been such a good Carboot so far. The sun was still out, it was warm, and I was really close to the end of the Carboot when I came across the absolute motherload of games. This stall had so many games, including GameCube games, and it is not very often that I see GameCube games at the Carboot, and there was loads. There were some decent titles here as well, like the Beyblade games, some Tony Hawk's, even the King Kong games, and there was some really good stuff here. But here is the thing with these massive stalls of games: you need to get just stuck in, pull some stuff out, check some prices, because at the end of the day, sometimes these stalls can be really, really overpriced, like we saw earlier in the day. And unfortunately this time it did seem like a lot of the games here were quite overpriced. And a lot of the games here unfortunately were games that are fairly common, or you can pick it up cheaper in CX. And at the end of the day, there is a small amount of risk picking up games here at the Carboot. Like Donkey Konga and Donkey Konga 2 are 2 games I would love to pick up. And it was a real shame because it's getting harder and harder to find some of these GameCube games just in general. And Donkey Konga and Donkey Konga 2 are 2 games I do need for my GameCube collection, but the discs were a little bit rough. They might have been scratched. At the end of the day, it is a risk picking up these games at the Carboot. Now, if I can get them cheaper, I'm more likely to take the risk. As you can see, I go back to these 2 or 3 times. I'm an hour in my mind. But what would you do in this situation? I just really don't know what to do. I just wanted to jump in here to talk a little bit more about these GameCube games and why I didn't pick more of them up. At the end of the day, there's always a slight risk buying games at the Carboot. There is no return policy, and at the end of the day, you'll probably never see any of these people ever again. And the problem was, a lot of these games were at exact market value. And a lot of these games had manuals missing, the boxes were a little bit rough and were slightly scratched. And if they don't work, that's just money out of my pockets. At the end of the day, if the game is priced the same as it would be at CX, chances are I'm going to go to CX and buy that game, because then if it doesn't work, at least you can return it for in-store credit or simply a refund. That's just my 2 cents. Now, back to the video. Onwards and upwards though, and you don't hear many people say this, but I wish this was the platinum version of this game rather than the black label Dance Stage, because this is one of the very few games I'm still looking for my PlayStation Platinum project. my mission for 2023 to complete the whole 160 game library of PlayStation Platinum games, and that is one that has evaded me for a long while. It had been such a good day, and it was so nice to be out in the sun, enjoying myself and going round these car boots, as I do love doing them. And at the end of the day, I will get up early to go to the car boot. I just prefer a lay-in, but I just don't understand why whoever decided car boots need to start so early in the morning. Here I am looking at one of the last DVDs of the day, this Tintin box set, which, you know, has a lovely lenticular cover, trades in for very little at CX. So that was a really good car boot. It was good weather, good spirits, some good finds. Let's go back to the games room now and check out those pickups. Here we are then, back in the games room, and what an amazing car boot that was. The sun was out, there was tons of games, but here is the thing, you have to be careful with your pricing at the car boot. There was a lot of games there that were very overpriced or just very common, and at the end of the day, if we're looking to add games to the collection, we want to do it cheap, and even more so, if we're looking for games to flip into CX, we need to get them at a good price. But we did manage to do both those things, and it's awesome 11 AM start car boot. One of our first pickups this time was a bundle, and this is far and away one of the best pieces of advice I can give you if you are going to the car boot, is try and bundle games together. So all of these games were separately priced, but I managed to get them a little bit cheaper as I bought a few more. So first off, we have Assassin's Creed Altair's Chronicles on a Nintendo DS. I never knew there was an Assassin's Creed game for the Nintendo DS. I have no idea if this is any good, but I have a general rule of thumb. If I've never seen a game before at the car boot and it is cheap, I will pick it up. This one isn't amazingly expensive in CX, but I've never seen it before, so maybe it's just one that's harder to find out in the wild. There's actually 2 Assassin's Creed games on the Nintendo DS with Assassin's Creed 2. And again, I have no idea if this game is any good, but I've never seen it before, so I wanted to pick it up. It's not the most expensive game in the entire world, but it's very cool to be able to play an Assassin's Creed game on a Nintendo DS. I got those Nintendo DS games bundled in with these next 2 games, and first off is the Devil May Cry HD collection, and this is a fantastic way to go back and play what is arguably the best Devil May Cry games, the first, second and third games, and these look absolutely incredible. This is a great box set. I absolutely love the Devil May Cry games. They may have gone a little bit off piste recently, especially with the abysmal DMC remake, but this is a great one to add to the collection. But sadly, next up we have our first fail. I got very excited and picked up this copy of BioShock the Collection, but if you look very closely at it, at the bottom there, it says Disc 1, BioShock and BioShock 2. That's because, unfortunately, this is from a box set, so it would have had a slipcase, and the other disc would have been BioShock Infinite. So a little bit of a fail per se, but for £15 for these 4 games, it's not the biggest fail of all time. While we're in the fail zone, let's get the other fail of today's car boot out of the way. It is Ridge Racer Unbounded, which I picked up for £2, even though it's slightly scratched. That's because I got this game confused with Ridge Racer 6, which a couple of months ago was really high on the trade-in. It's gone down very quickly, and it just goes to prove, above anything else, you need to keep an eye on those CX prices as they fluctuate all the time. Sadly, this one was a fail. It's really not very often I will pick up old PC games, but for some reason I thought this game, Medal of Honor, had actually been discontinued and you could not buy it online, but it turns out you still can. But this is like an £8 game on GOG, which, if you don't know, is one of the best ways to play a lot of these old PC games. I picked this up for 50p, and at the end of the day, again, I still think, even with these older PC games, it's always best to own physical. It's really great to see how many cheap Xbox One games there are recently at the car boots, and I've been looking to pick up this game for absolute ages, Super Lucky's Tale. If you're like a fan of the old school kind of N64 platformers like Mario 64, Banjo, stuff like this, this is a fantastic throwback, I would say. I'd say this is a retro modern kind of platform game. It just reminds you like Banjo-Kazooie, even Conker's Bad Fur Day with slightly less swearing. I think this was on Games Pass, isn't anymore. I picked this up for £3, and I also picked up Lego Jurassic World for £3, which I traded in CX for £5. Here we have it then, our final pickup of the 11 AM car boot is Just Cause 4 for just £2. I am really glad I could have made a deal on that Terminator 2 NECA figure. That was an absolutely amazing figure, but sadly the price was perfectly right. Much like a lot of the GameCube games today, they were basically priced to absolute market value, and to be honest, at the end of the day, with the car boot, if the game doesn't work, or you have any issues, there's no recourse. You can't take it back. You have no kind of way of receipting it, and it's just a bit of a risk. So mainly when I'm looking for games at Carboot, I want to get them cheap. Games like this, Just Cause 2, it's a £4 game in CX. I managed to get this for half the price, and it's a fantastic way to build a games collection. That is what, for me, the Carboot is all about. There we have it then, folks. That was the 11 AM Carboot. But please, let me know in the comments down below, do you prefer a late start Carboot or an early start? I can see the advantage of having a Carboot start early in the day, because then you have the rest of your day. But for me, I do enjoy my beauty sleep, and it's nice to be able to go to a Carboot, a leisurely 11 AM start. But let me know, do you have many late starting Carboots in your areas? And let me know as well, do you prefer the late or early starts? I hope you enjoyed this video. It's just the start of the Carboot series, and there's plenty more to come. So hit that like button, subscribe, and as always, keep playing the game. See y'all soon.